Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now in this video, I want us to add a child domain to our current prbinvestments.local domain, and the child domain will be called toronto.prbinvestments.local. Now before we get into it, let's just refresh our minds with what a domain is. And you can think of a domain as a virtual space that contains all of your objects. So your user, computer, security, group policies, as well as scripts are stored inside of our domain. Specifically, these objects are stored on a database called the ntds.dit database. And this database is created when we promote our server to be a domain controller. Now, a child domain is really a subspace of the parent domain, and it contains the same objects. So we have user account, security, scripts, and group policy objects. And these objects are separated between the two domains. Now, child domains are rarely deployed, and you would want to deploy one if you had like a branch office in another country, or if you need different policies to govern both sites. The child domain would also have its own administrators and IT personnel to manage it. So before you deploy one, you would want to definitely speak with your stakeholders to ensure that you're making the correct choice. And for the requirements, I'm basically continuing from my last video. So here is the current setup that I have. So we have two OPNsense routers, one called OPNsense-VM and one called OPNsense-TOR. These routers are able to communicate with each other's network. A new domain controller called TOR-DC-01 connected to the OPNsense-TOR router with the IP address 10.100.100.20 with a /24 subnet. And we have a Windows 11 client machine that will be joining the new domain. Okay, so with that introduction out of the way, let's dive in. Okay, so I'm currently logged into my TOR-DC-01 machine, and we can see that this machine is added to the prbinvestments.local domain. It has an IP address of 10.100.100.20, and it has DC-01 as the DNS server. To create a child domain, it's pretty similar to how we create a regular domain. We basically click on Manage, then add roles and features. We'll click Next on the welcome page. We'll leave it selected as role-based or feature-based installation and click Next. For the destination server, we'll leave it as TOR-DC-01 and click Next. And the role we want to select is the Active Directory Domain Services role. Next, we'll click on Add the required features and then click Next. Now, we won't select any additional features, so we'll click Next here. Then Next, and finally Install. Now we'll wait for the installation to be completed. And once it is done, we'll select the option to promote this server to be a domain controller. And for the deployment configuration, we want to select the option to add a new domain to an existing for us. The parent domain will be prbinvestments.local, and the new domain will be Toronto. If you live in a different city, please feel free to change this. Now, I'm currently logged in with my PRB admin credentials. This user account is only a member of the domain admin security group. Now, if I click Next, you will see that it fails because my PRB admin user does not have the necessary permissions to proceed. Because we are expanding our Active Directory for us, we will need additional privileges. So for this instance, I will change the credential and I will sign in with my administrator account for my prbinvestments.local domain. And now you can see that I'm able to click Next. I will create a password for the directory services restore mode. And then we'll click on Next. I will click Next again and leave the administrator account for the DNS delegation. We'll leave the NetBIOS name to be Toronto and click Next. We'll leave the paths as default and click Next. Then we can review our configuration, and I see that everything here is good, so I will click Next. Then I will click on Install, and we'll wait for the installation to be completed. And once the installation is completed, it will ask us to sign out and reboot, which it will do automatically. Then once it's back online, we'll try to sign in. Now, one thing to notice here is when I click on Other User, notice that we're signing into the Toronto domain. Now, we currently don't have any users created as yet. We do have the administrator account that gets created when we install the domain service role, so we will use that to sign in. And once we're logged in, let's look at a few things. Now, first thing I want us to look at will be our Active Directory users and computers. So in Server Manager, we'll click on Tools, then Active Directory users and computers. And we can see our domain is called toronto.prbinvestments.local, and we have our default organizational units that gets created. Now, I will turn on advanced features so we can see the other OUs and containers. And just for a frame of reference, I will log into my DC01 domain controller. And here I will open up Active Directory. And we can see our domain here is called prbinvestments.local. And we can also see our PRB users OU with our computers, groups, and users OU right under it. Now back over on TOR, these objects do not exist because remember this is a separate virtual space, and what exists on the parent domain will not be transferred down to the child domain. So we do not have these objects, but we can create it. I can right click on toronto.prbinvestments.local and I can create a new OU called Toronto users, and under that I can create 3 more OUs called computers, groups, and users. Now, remember when we create the user, group accounts, and other objects, these objects will exist in the Toronto domain only. These won't be replicated over to the parent domain. However, if we were to create a second domain controller called TOR-DC-01 for the Toronto domain, only then will these objects be replicated. Next, I want us to look at our group policy. So in Server Manager, I will open up the Group Policy Management console. And here you can see that our forest is prbinvestments.local, but our domain is toronto.prbinvestments.local. And again, we do not inherit any GPOs from our parent domain. We just have the default domain policies created. And if we were to go over to DC01 and look at the Group Policy Management console on DC01, we can see that both the forest and domain is called prbinvestments.local. Now that we have a new domain, let's add a Windows client machine to the Toronto domain. Now, I have a Windows 11 client machine called TOR-Win-11, and this machine is on the same network as the TOR-DC-01 machine. Now, firstly, what I will do is modify the network settings. The IP address will be 10.100.100.10 with a 255.255.255.0 subnet mask and 10.100.100.254 as the gateway. The DNS server will be 10.100.100.20, which is the IP address for the TOR-DC-01 domain controller. Now we'll save the IP address changes. And next, what I want is to go to our system settings. And here I will click on domain or workgroup, then change, and our domain will be Toronto. Then we'll click on OK, and here we'll enter our administrator user credentials. Now remember, this administrator account is for the Toronto domain, not the prbinvestments.local domain. These are two separate accounts, so just remember that. Now if you enter the same password for both of these accounts, which is not recommended in production, but in a test environment is fine, it will work regardless of what you do. And once the account is authenticated, we'll just reboot our system. Now, while that is rebooting, I will head back to our tor-dc01 domain controller. And in Active Directory, I will create a new user, and we'll name this user tor-admin, and this user will be in the users OU. So I'll go ahead and create this user. Then back over on tor-win-11, I will log in with that tor-admin user that we just created. And we can see that it does indeed work, which confirms that this computer is on the Toronto domain. And once the authentication is completed, we can see that we're on the desktop. Now, before I end this video, let's try one more thing. So what I will do is I will sign out of my desktop. And at the logon screen, I want to log in with my PRB admin account that exists on the PRB investments.local domain. Now remember, the PRB admin user does not exist on the Toronto domain, so we will need to specify the PRB investments.local domain when we're logging in. So if we enter that in, so I'll type PRB investments.local \, and notice the sign into domain changes. It now says PRB investments.local, and after the \, we'll enter PRB admin, and we'll enter the password. Then we press enter, and success. You can see that it is logging us in. So although the domain and objects are separate from each other, you can still access resources in the child domain using user, security, or group objects from the parent domain. Alright, so that is it for this video. Now, we did learn about child domains, but really child domains aren't used that much in most organizations. Most places just have one Active Directory domain and use group policies and other methods to really separate out access if they need to. But if you need to create a separate space, maybe for testing, or maybe because your company bought another entity or another organization and you need to separate your access, knowing how these systems work, even though you're probably never going to use it, will make you a better admin as you proceed through your career. So that is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.